Hey, hey, greetings.
Hey, how you doing, Tarami?
I'm doing well, doing well. How about yourself?
Good, man. Sorry, I hope I'm a little bit behind schedule.
No, man, you right on time. You right on time. Shola, right?
That's it.
Yeah, yeah, nice, man. I've been doing a little bit of digging into your work, man. Stuff is crazy.
Oh, nice. Thank you, man.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to get right into it. My name is Tarami Redis, and I run a brand called Drumz Uhuru, and
Uhuru.
is to, gather and collect and unify artists, musicians, percussionists, culture workers that are in and of African diasporic folk traditions, and to kind of just elevate our standards, have conversations about our craft and what we do, where we're coming from, why we do what we do, what's the purpose of it, how can we, address some of the changes that are going on, right? Because cultures have traditional value and traditional meaning, but we find ourselves in a new age, in a new world with, dynamics that probably didn't exist, when these traditions were, going on or were created. So, you seem like somebody that's, very well known in this space, very well established. And I wanted to bring you on and, just kind of have a conversation with you.
Lovely. No, yeah, thank you, Tarami. I appreciate it. Yeah, I
Thank
like the work that you guys are doing as well
thank
with
you.
your school and studies and practices. It's good.
So, Shola, could you introduce yourself? Who are you? Where you coming from? What's your background?
Okay, so my name is Sola Akingbola. I'm a Nigerian, UK-based musician. I was born in Nigeria, southwestern Nigeria, what is known today as Yoruba land. But I came to the UK at a very young age, 2, 3 years old, and I've been in the UK ever since. So I've really grown up here. So I always speak of I entered the world through this idea that we call Nigeria, that we call Yoruba land, but the seed was planted in the soil that we called England. And so we have this interesting idea around identity and influence, growing up in the UK. As you can imagine, the UK is full of so many influences, so many things come through this part of the world and come to this part of the world. And
Yeah.
even now, there's so many different cultures here, man. The UK is everybody's here, everybody from all over the world. So it's a real melting pot.
Oh, man. So, what was your first introduction to music or to drum music?
Um, it was it's more to do with what was played in the home. When I was growing up, it was Yoruba music was played in the house all the time. Haruna Ishola, Sunny Ade, Ebenezer Obey, Yusuf Olatunji. These are old, very famous Yoruba musicians who were seeped in the Yoruba culture of poems and riddles and proverbs that were used in a musical form,
Mhm.
predominantly using percussion, the likes of Yusuf Olatunji, Haruna Ishola. Sonny Ade then brought in the slide guitar and guitars and the dum dum elements. So growing up for a long time, that was the musical influences that I was surrounded by. And then gradually it became a lot of Black American music, like what they call in this country rare groove music. So I'm talking bands like, this might be a bit ahead of your time, like LA Boppers, Mandrill,
Mhm.
Johnny Hammond, obviously Earth, Wind and Fire when they were before they became huge, when they were really playing kind of jazz funk with huge horn sections, incredible arrangements, Morris White, Philip Bailey, you know, uh, George Clinton, Funkadelic, and James Brown. I started to get into that kind of music from around the age of 11 because I used to I used to save my money to go and buy the new singles that was coming over from America. So I had a little job as a paper round boy, and every Saturday morning when I got paid, I go straight to the record shop. I need that new James Brown 7 inch. I need that new Earth, Wind and Fire. I need that new Funkadelic Parliament. So I'm deeply influenced by that Black American sound, specifically that Black American jazz sound that moved from the jazz of, your Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, Duke to Bird, Miles, you know, the development of that sound and the groove that was very fundamental to that sound, as well as obviously the harmonic language and the melodic language, which we know, is from the blues. So that sound really captured it captured my attention on a deep level, and it's always been with me.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That's amazing because it's all connected, right? It all has that sort of like four on the floor feel. It all has sort of that language of speaking to the soul level, speaking of that soul experience, as an African person, as a Black person in the world. So it's interesting to hear your perspective, as coming from continental Africa via, Europe, to hear you resonating and picking up on those, I guess, subtleties in the language, man, that's really cool.
Mm, mm.
What was the moment that you realized that this was something that you wanted to dedicate your life to?
Yeah, it was very late, because my parents or my father specifically came to the UK to become a doctor. So the thing for us at the time was at that time there was always a sense that we were going back to Nigeria. So I always grew up with this is not my home. England is not my home. I was born in Nigeria, and we were going back. Dad would always tell us that we're here to study, qualify, and go home. So it took me a while to settle here, to be honest with you. But then things changed. Dad didn't pursue the the medicine, and then he had to get a job. Mum got a job teaching and working with children. So it took me a while to feel that okay, we're here. I'm in the UK. I better find a way to be here. And because my parents were expecting an academic route, and also, I'm the firstborn, so with Yorubas, it's the firstborn that sets the way. So I disappointed them because I didn't finish what I went to university to do, because I was really inspired by the music midway through what they call A levels in this country. So that's just before you go to university. So around 17, 18, I was introduced to a Nigerian writer, a guy called Professor Wole Soyinka, very powerful, amazing Yoruba, Nigerian, African scholar with a very international perspective. And his cousin is Fela Anikulapo Kuti.
Oh, wow.
It was through reading Professor Shoyinka, I was then introduced to Fela. And then between those two, Fela and Shoyinka, that became my new perspective. So Fela really evoked so much in me with the music because Fela was a Nigerian who came here and studied at Trinity, and he was the first Nigerian that I came across who wasn't on that academic that Nigerians, doctors, lawyers, bankers, they do the academic thing. Very few. Now everybody wants to be creative, but when I was growing up, no, 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 no. There were very few. So for me, between the writer Shoyinka and his cousin, the musician, I found a model that I wanted to follow. And then I was lucky enough to meet two people, Lekan Babalola, who's the curator for Yoruba Contemporary Arts Trust here in the UK. And he has always been trying to push Yoruba culture here for the last 30 years. Um, and he introduced me to an amazing Nigerian musician called Gaspar Lawal, who is also from Nigeria. And Gaspar took me under his wing. I must have been 18, 19. I was going through a difficult time, teenage, trying to find some structure to my life after dropping out. And it's Gaspar that really introduced me to Yoruba music in a very contemporary way, because Gaspar played with the Rolling Stones, Ginger Baker, Traffic, Stevie Winwood. He was here in the 50s and 60s when that new kind of enlightenment was happening in the 60s. Gaspar was part of that music as a Nigerian musician. So Gaspar has been my mentor.
Wow. Man, that's beautiful. It's so cool that when you can see like, yeah, like what I want to do, who I want to be, and how I want to be, it is possible because people have done it before.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. exactly that. Oh, could see exactly that. Oh, it can be done, contrary to what my dad was saying, because he was a bit discriminatory about musicians. And again, that's an old colonial attitude of, well, musicians in Yoruba land, they're usually boys who don't go to school. They didn't pass the necessary Western exams to be regarded as. I completely, in my spirit, I knew that no, there's something more here. There's a different kind of education here in that sound, in that drumming, in the poems, in the proverbs. It's not Western, but that doesn't mean that it's not educational. So I kind of perceived that from a very early age, especially after reading Wole Soyinka. I could see that, okay, this is a Nigerian scholar who studied in England at Leeds University, but he was able to write plays and books and stories that encompassed a Yoruba perspective, like pre-Islam and pre-Christian. That was always the thing for me. So I did classics at school eventually. So I studied the Greeks, and it was the Greek classics that inspired my interest in Yoruba mythology and stories pre-Christianity, pre-Islam. So that was the question I would always pose to my father, that, okay, before you met the Europeans and before you met the Muslims, what was your structure of education as Yoruba people? And then there's no problem. Of course, it's a global world, so we have to be open to influence. But what I was saying was, what was your particularity, or what would you regard yourselves as Yorubas, that this is our particular perspective to world ideas? That's what I'm interested in, because otherwise it feeds into the idea that, okay, black people have no history, black people have no science, black people have no sense of mathematics, black people have no sense of culture. It's a lie. Of course, it's a lie. The very fact that black people can experience an incredible historic trauma of being taken from one part of the world to the new part of the world, and in that journey and in arriving in a new space, look at what they've created. We're just speaking of music as one perspective of, this is an incredible reinvention of a people out of a incredible trauma. So I never think about it as, when people say, oh, they're sons and daughters of slaves. I said, don't use that language. That's not what they are. They're incredible human beings who were able to come through an incredible traumatic tragedy, actually, and turn themselves into something powerful that still resonates today as we speak. You understand what I'm saying?
1,000%. 1,000%.
So
I
it's
couldn't.
that that needs to be held all the time, not the history of they were slaves. Of course, there's always been slaves. There's been slaves way before black people were slaves. In Europe, they created their own slavery system that enabled the Romans to build their civilizations and the Ottomans to build their civilizations. So don't get caught up in that. It's being human is about a consistent transformative process of being, and that's what those our people were able to do brilliantly under horrific circumstances. And it is that, for me, that I'm trying to celebrate all the time with music, with the poetry, and those cultural ideas that I've received from my grandparents.
Yeah, yeah, man. That's beautiful. That's exactly it. And that's really the whole concept that, this platform is about,
I feel that.
community.
I feel that. I feel that.
Yeah,
I watched the one that you sent me with Yael,
yeah.
which was brilliant. It was beautiful. I watched the whole interview, and Yael is a fantastic. I've met him a few times. His cousin Siddiqui Dembele. We worked together in a theatre piece with the Royal Shakespeare Company called Hamlet, and I brought him in
Hey.
to work with me. Uh,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's so funny. A friend of mine, a percussionist friend of mine, sent me a video because he was having a lesson with Siddiqui, and I just got the job for the Royal Shakespeare Company to compose the music for Hamlet. And I said, "You got to give me this guy's number." I was just watching the lesson, but I could hear in his sound that this guy is the real deal. And I contacted him. I said, "Siddiqui, I need you on this project that I'm working on." And I told them at the Royal Shakespeare Company that you need to get this guy involved in this production, because without him, I'm not doing this production.
Mm-hmm.
And he came
Yeah.
and we worked together, and he was fantastic. And that's how I met Yael as well. And I said, yeah, you guys are the real deal. And as Yale was saying, djembe fala is more than, it's not just about drumming. It's, of course, it's more than drumming. This is what we're talking about. And this is what we're talking about with regards to the concept of education where we come from. It's more holistic. It's not just about an intellectual categorization and being able to, use just logic. There's other kinds of logic that we know how to use through these means of music, proverbs, movement. There's
Tech,
history and storytelling in there. Just because they can't see it or they can't hear it doesn't mean it's not there. And that's why it's our responsibility, this, your generation, my generation, because we've grown up in this new environment. We can say, well, actually, yeah, what you represent as this, we represent as that. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, it's a technology.
It's a technology, bro. Exactly. It's a technology. And we need to develop it. So, and that's why I love your Drumz Uhuru as well. That, okay, that's really good. You're studying that stuff. You're bringing it to the kids and bringing it into the communities. Absolutely, absolutely. It's brilliant.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I wanted to ask you about your second album, How Should I, Part
Okay.
One EP. What went into that work? What inspired that work? What is the intention behind that project?
Well, exactly. It's a continuation of exactly what we're talking about. It was a means to explore what it what it feels like, what it sounds like to grow up in the West, where in certain there are a lot of spaces where we feel we're not having our voices heard, or trying to create spaces for more narratives around the idea of being and the idea of identity and its fluidity, and also taking it outside of the kind of um, particular constructs of what it means to be English, what it means to be Yoruba, what does it mean to be Black American. Those things are things that we have to keep exploring and deconstructing, you know, because I think going forward into the new century, I think we need a much more expansive idea of being, which doesn't mean that we have to forget about those inspirations and influences from family and tradition. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we have to expand out further because, after all, that's what the universe is doing as we speak. It's expanding. So why should we contain ourselves to, cultural ideas that we've received? It's good to receive them because it has an emotional perspective, in terms of our parents, our brothers and sisters, and aunts and uncles and communities. But it's to enlighten us to look further and open up our possibilities on a much more powerful scale. So that's what the album is trying to, that's why it's called How Should I? It should have been called How Should We? The how do we move forward in an ever changing world that's rapidly expanding, rapidly changing. New technologies, like you said, are being hoisted upon us, and most of us don't know how it really works. So we need to study and explore the technologies in our various fields so that we know how that works and how we can then combine that with these new technologies of AI and computational theory and those kind of things. We need to bring it into perspective and ask those questions of ourselves, that what does that mean for us and those who are not involved in that development, because it's being developed in laboratories and scientific spaces. I don't know whether they're thinking about the various communities, other communities that's being developed for business and for control to a certain extent. So we need to explore our own technologies.
100%. I think there's definitely space for it, as far as using AI as a tool, right? A tool to learn, to develop, to grow, to get information. Um, but like you said, we have to do due diligence to understand what it's really doing. Like, what is it really? So we don't get caught up in, just relying on it all the time for
Exactly.
everything or creative output. And I think it's kind of a double-edged sword because I think while it can kind of help creativity to a certain extent, and
I agree.
help, that skill building, it can also hinder it because
Yes.
now we're not relying on the connection to source, right? To God that we have as human beings that the AI gets from us kind of, but it's not connected to it directly. So I think
Yes.
that's something that has to be negotiated.
I agree. I agree. Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you this question. It's kind of been on my mind.
Yeah.
How does rhythm inform you harmonically?
That's a great question, Termi. That's a great question. It's I did a masterclass last week at the Guildhall School of Music, and that question came up whilst we were working in the class. So we I introduced the students, 20 students, to a particular piece that you can see on YouTube now called Ifanla, which was the theme tune for a television series that I wrote the music for with Warner Brothers called Bob Hart's Abishola.
Hmm. Hmm.
The theme music to that, I use that with the students as okay, there's a fundamental rhythmic structure that I've used to build the composition. And I think for me, once I find a rhythmic figure that I'm able to build my composition around, what's happening is I'm it's like building it's the whole thing of structure from the rhythmic idea king pati king pa king pati ding kating king pa king. I'll use that rhythm to then build what is possible or what can I hear this a possible response to that phrase king tati ding tating ding, and then the more we find the right response we then work out okay what can respond to that new phrase and the next new phrase and so on and so forth, and therefore you start to build this rhythmic structure. Then the harmonic structure will the harmonic structure is about interpretation. I mean, harmony for me is about release and contraction from an emotional point of view in line with the melody. So there's three things happening. The rhythm is giving me insight to melodic possibilities. If I have a rough melodic idea that I've taken from the ding, da ding, ding. I mean, I'm doing that rhythmically, but if I add a melody to it, you see what I mean? So I'm starting to build a melodic structure around it. And then in thinking about that melody, I'm also hearing the harmonic possibilities as I develop the melody. And then, of course, that's your technical and what's the word I'm trying to use? Your harmonic language. How vast is your harmonic language in relation to the melody, so that you can create a harmonic interaction between the harmony, the melody, and the harmony that is interesting to people's ear. Otherwise, it can get repetitive. And I think that's one of the problems with a lot of the kind of, I'm not criticizing it, but a lot of the mainstream music, what's happening is they're feeding you now the chords. You can just lift the chord from somewhere. So you're not really learning how to find alternative versions to that melody. That's the importance of studying that. You must study different harmonic language, and definitely culturally, like gospel, jazz, rhythm and blues in Yoruba land. When I listen to some of the music in Yoruba land, there's this thing around the minor ninth type chords. You know, I can hear it in the sound. But then we can say, okay, how can we shift that? Because I don't want to be repetitive, but I want to incorporate that emotional feeling I get when I hear that, E minor nine chord or whatever. And then, do you see what I'm saying? Or maybe I'm not being as clear as I.
No, I understand. I follow you. I follow
But
you.
it becomes a journey that's very important in terms of you keeping your practice, your technical practice as a musician, very disciplined and structured and growing so that you don't become repetitive in what you do. That's why we study. We study because we're looking for another way, other ways of articulating similar ideas, and also we study because we want to try and engage different ideas, maybe ideas that are completely different to what our perspective is, you know? And I think that's what I've tried to do with the album How Should I? I've tried to, your question at the beginning was perfect. The rhythmic foundations of that album are absolutely Yoruba in terms of all of my ideas have come from a Yoruba rhythmic perspective
Yes.
on all of the tracks. And I'm looking for that relationship sonically from Yoruba to the Americas, to the South Americas, down to the Caribbean, back to UK. Do you see what I mean?
Yes. Yes. Mm. Wow. Okay. That's powerful. Man, that's powerful.
Because
With
that's what
that,
we're trying to make that link. We're trying to make that link and reconnect because there was very much a disconnect for us. And I can feel it. Now we're realizing we have to reconnect that because it's connected to something very, very powerful, very substantial, and actually an endless pool of power, dynamic energy that can be uplifting, nourishing, enlightening, educational, nourishing. I'm repeating myself, but you get my point.
yeah, yeah, because it is connected. It's just in our minds, it's not always there.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Wow. So with that experience or with that perspective, how do you carry that into your leadership, being a band leader or even just being a leader, in the space, in the industry or in the community?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what we're talking about. It's there's a difficulty there because you're also learning about yourself and working out your own vulnerabilities and your areas of where, okay, I need to do more work there. I need to find a better way to communicate that idea, or I need to find a better way to support people that are not comfortable with that idea or executing certain ideas, So I think the key word there is communication and trying to find a way to enable, that good communication that inspires and enables people in the group to find their own voices and hopefully see what it is that they want to explore as a result of our communication.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I get that. I
Yeah.
get that. What do you see as the future of, I would say, what I would say traditional African folk music? How do you see that being carried on and carried forward in the future? What would you like to see at least?
Yeah, no, I love the people who are really focusing on keeping that flame alive and keeping that influence known and disseminating that information out into the world. But I'm also interested in how we keep the idea of tradition open and fluid so that it doesn't become something like a museum that is just there and kind of become what they sort of like turned into stone almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's no, 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 no. The energy that is enabling that tradition to come into being is moving all the time. All the time. So yes, we go back or we look back to study it and to understand it, and also it's an emotional thing as well, in terms of connecting with those people who had the brilliance of mind and body and understand, to create that for us as a foundation with which to grow and expand. So there's a thing of honoring that. But I always used to say to people that when I'm performing or presenting something. I'm always thinking about my grandmother or her family because they were performers, they were drummers, they were historians and linguists. And I'm always thinking that I'm trying to bring something. If my grandmother were alive today, I would hope that I was bringing her something new that would really interest her. That so like, what kind of thing are you singing? But it would, it would prick her ears. And the great professor I mentioned at the beginning, Wole Soyinka, Wole Soyinka, there's one of his lines in a play called Death and the King's Horseman. And I can't quote the line verbatim, but he says that we must pierce the ears of the ancestors with accents that will cause them to prick their ears that, kilele, what kind of rhythm is this? What kind of melody as they
Yeah,
use it? But what he's telling us is that we must push. We must push and not get tied down by, oh, we have to keep the tradition like this. We have to keep it like this. Of course, there are people that want to do that, but we must push. The tradition is a live, dynamic, powerful thing that's moving, 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 moving.
man, absolutely. Absolutely. Man, Shola, I want to thank you so much for your time, for your energy, your
You're
perspective.
welcome, man. You're welcome.
Man,
It's lovely. I really, really appreciate the work that you're doing and keep on doing what you're doing, bro. And hopefully one day when we come to the States, either with Jamiroquai or with my own project, I look forward to meeting you in person and come and do
most
something.
definitely. Most definitely. How can people get in touch with you, learn more about you, learn more about
Yeah,
your
just
support you?
just check me on Instagram, send a message. I have a website, www.solakingbola.com. Check the website and yeah, on Facebook. So absolutely, people don't be afraid to reach out.
Thank you. Have a great day,
You
Shola.
too. You too, Tommy. Thank you very much, man. Take care.